By titling the video as I have, I've essentially painted a target on my back the size of a large continent. For the next week, I'll probably get death threats, anthrax sent in the mail, and my YouTube channel shut down for spam and deceptive practices. I'm of course talking about the new Pokemon game, Scarlet and Violet. This is the newest game to drop on the Switch, and again, I do just want to get it out there. I understand that the Switch cannot have the processing power of current gen consoles, but I've seen so many clips of this game running like a PowerPoint slideshow at the best of times. I do want to say this isn't the game all the time, just probably a lot of it. Usually when you buy a Switch and you get a game, it's gonna run at around 20 to 30 FPS. That's a given. I'm not expecting... It's not great, especially if you're used to, 60 FPS games, but at the same time, it's to be expected. Can't really criticize it. The thing is, on the Switch, many first-party games that are like ported over to it, and even exclusives, they don't run that great. One notable example for me, there's a game that came out in 2010 on the Xbox 360. It was called Deadly Premonition. That game was just janky as all hell, ran terribly. The game itself was terrible, but kind of in a so bad it's good way. It was the Room of video games. Now that game got a sequel on the Switch, which was an exclusive, and playing that game, if you go into the overworld and try to like move around outside, I am not joking you on average, you'll probably get around 10 FPS at best. The thing is with these Pokemon games that come out that are just so rushed and unoptimized, there's always an argument, is it Game Freak's fault? Are they being lazy because it's just essentially a money printer? Or is it Nintendo giving them such terribly short deadlines that it's impossible to come up with a good game? One thing I love about these Pokemon games though, you get these people that just God defend it into the heavens. Any time a case is made against a game that is Pokemon, someone will try to excuse it saying it's like a hidden feature or something. So here's a good example. This has nothing to do with performance, just the game itself. So the way the overworld works in Pokemon, it kind of looks like Breath of the Wild if you ran it on potato settings. And in that game, there was a lot of cliff faces, and the same is here in this game. If you try to go up these cliff faces, even on a Pokemon, you'll slide down. But if you go backwards and start jumping backwards, they didn't code in the physics properly, so it'll still push you away from the mountain, but because you're facing away from the mountain, the game will push you upwards. So you'll literally do this like backwards B-hop up the mountain, making any traversal easy. I do want to say I get it. It's not like this is a deal breaker for anyone. No one's going to not buy a game because there's a backwards jumping exploit. But the point is, this video has been posted onto Twitter, but you have people in the replies saying things like, when Super Mario 64 came out and people found out about the backwards jumping bug, everyone celebrated it. But in Pokemon, everyone's shitting on it. It's not fair. I am not joking you, by the way. That is a legitimate argument someone brought up. I'd show you the screenshot, but I know you're all just going to try and find out who it is, even if I say don't harass them, so I'm not going to. Now, the thing is, like I said, even though I'm boohooing and shitting into my proverbial diaper, nothing's going to change. It never will. It's been like this for a while. Pokemon games have always came out to be quite janky, low FPS performance issues. But the thing is, Arceus, which came out like 10 months ago, that was a much better game than this. It actually performed a lot better. I've even seen some people on Twitter saying that like, it's not Game Freak's fault. We just need a Switch Pro. You are defending a company so bad that you are just hoping that there's an excuse to give them more of your money. I think regardless of if it's Game Freak's fault for being lazy or Nintendo kind of just ramming them with these very short turnaround times, it's not fair to put it on the consumer. And this is a $60 game. I've had friends play this game, and I've seen so many compilations on Twitter of like, trainers clapping with their elbows, like their limbs are twisted, like that scene in the second Harry Potter film. Pokemon themselves just phasing in and out of reality. And also your character turning into a literal monster when interacting with any kind of Pokemon. And one of my personal favorites, cutscenes where the characters are rendered in unironically 2 frames a second. It's like a stop motion film. Now at the minute, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet has a review score of around 76 on Metacritic, but a user score of 2.8.
What does the decimeter say?
2.8.
Drunken, but that's as high as the meter.
2.8.
Not great.
Now I was kind of thinking, there's a bit of a disparity there. Let's have a look at the reviews. I'm not joking when I say this. I saw one of the reviews from a company called Nintendoros, which I'm sure there's no bias there, having Nintendo in the name. They gave the game 100 out of 100, which is a perfect score, might I add. But they open with the sentence saying, despite some technical problems. How are you going to give a game a perfect score and your opening sentence is a negative? This is obviously my own personal opinion as well, but, I still find it very outdated how you can't just, like, search for friends. You need to, put out, like, a friend code for someone to add and then get their friend code. So the only real way to meet people is either Twitter mutuals or on a Discord server. Also, the fact that this is yet another fully priced Pokemon game with no voice acting whatsoever. And I mean, I get it. Some people don't really enjoy the voice acting. They kind of just like reading text, but it gets so mundane and boring after a while that you just end up like mass scrolling dialogue because there's just nothing to keep you stimulated. It's basically more of the same of like every previous Pokemon game, but now there's co-op, and that's fine. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. The Pokemon franchise in itself and the games, they are good. They've got a very good system, you know, catching Pokemon, training them, using them in battles. You don't need to reinvent the wheel there. I just don't want the wheel to be... I just don't want the wheel to be 12 FPS. I'm not going to act like I'm some Pokemon lore scholar. I'm only recently getting into the series. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've spent like an abhorrent amount of money on Pokemon booster boxes. I think they're about $150 a booster box, and then you get one rare card in there, which will be worth $160 in 10 years, so technically a profit. Honestly, I do want to say though, I think it's really cool. You've got an open world Pokemon game with co-op, and because your Pokemon turns into a bike,
This bike is so cool. It should be on ride for Lord Reeds.
I'm gonna have to give it 100 out of 100 score. It's flawless. This is Future Pyro here. I actually ended up doing a bit more research into the topic, partly because, you know, how evolving and interesting the situation is, but mostly because the video didn't hit 8 minutes and I want to make $20 instead of $2. So apparently Pokemon Arceus, the game that came out 10 months ago, it was a full game, but it was more of a test from Game Freak to see if they could actually create this huge open world with co-op, and the follow-up game would be Scarlet and Violet. Which again, it makes no sense as to why the previous game is infinitely better. I mean, if you compare screenshots, gameplay, it runs better and it looks better. The one thing it's missing out is the co-op. And again, I love co-op. I think it's great, but not if the entire game is going to run at like 15 FPS. Also, there's been loads of reports, even like from my own friends, basically saying that they've had to play Scarlet or Violet docked. They can't play it handheld because if they do, the game will just pretty much crash instantly. And apparently there's also this really common bug I didn't talk about earlier. If you're battling Pokemon, like mid-battle, you'll see other Pokemon naturally spawning in the background in the environment, and they will just walk in between the battle, like complete NPC mode. Here's a clip that my girlfriend sent me of her playing the game, and you can just see a Raichu clipping into the geometry. Now, this one I literally just found out, and it killed me. So apparently you can make sandwiches in the game, and if you complete them, there's an animation, and it makes Cooking Mama look like it has ray tracing. I'm not sure what's worse, the fact that the trainer like doesn't even bite into the sandwich while there's a floating PNG of a sandwich midair, or the fact that when they finish the animation, which is totally done off screen, there's a bunch of Pokemon in their idle animation floating in the air. But the thing is, despite all of this, all these bugs, performance issues, the fact that the game is unplayable for some people, it is still the second best-selling Pokemon game of all time, at least in the UK. Apparently, the only Pokemon game in the UK that has outsold this is Pokemon Sun and Moon, and that came out in like 2016 when the Pokemon Go hype was at its peak because it pretty much just came out. At the end of the day, bugs aside, performance issues aside, if you enjoy the new Pokemon, that's great. I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with the gameplay. It's just the performance issues and how it crashes, and there's just so many bugs. What I think I'm going to do now is end the video with a clip of Nitrorad playing Pokemon Violet on stream, and the game just works completely as intended.
I want to go home. I don't know why it's funny. Wait. Oh, I see why he wants to go home. Because he is stuck in the void. Oh, never mind! He went home! Oh, rest in peace, buddy! The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away.